Hello and welcome along to the Big Breakdown podcast with me, your host, Chris Stafford. Um, the whole point of this is to try and create a new environment for us to share ideas, talk about coaching, and what it actually looks like on the field. And so you don't have to listen to just my bluff tones for these episodes. I'd like to introduce my co-host for this journey, good friend of mine, someone I've coached with for a long time, Mr. Harrison Marshall.
Hello. How are we?
Good, you?
Good. Yeah, enjoying lockdown life as much as I can.
Well, yeah, we're all used to that now, aren't we? So I suppose that we just really talk about why we've decided to collaborate and come together and put this together. Now my view is that alongside a YouTube channel, which will be putting some videos out to support a lot of the content that we're talking about, um, the whole point of this is to try and highlight to coaches how we can really develop some good practice in our sessions and really push the game on a little bit from a coaching point of view.
Yeah, I think that's I think when you explained that why you wanted to kind of create this podcast, that's what kind of drew me in. I don't think there's plenty of rugby podcasts out there now, but I think if we can and this what hopefully this podcast will bring is providing that context to a lot of them, and this would be quite an interesting getting lots of different views from different people and how they actually implemented it, and hopefully we can create that that shared coaching world.
Yeah, definitely. And we've got an exciting series one planned out for you. We've got some good guests lined up along the way, and hopefully we'll get some popularity and we can get onto a season two, which we're already in the process of putting a plan together for as well. So I suppose we just quickly give an outline of our shared experiences, Harrison, just so people have got an idea of our backgrounds, what we've come from. So I suppose the key bit is when we first started coaching together at Otley Enzians in Leeds, and that's where we started to put together some of the key concepts from the masters that we've done, isn't it?
Yeah, I think it was the summer of 2017. I think you invited me along to assist you down at Otley Enzians after you got the head coach role. I think that was you just gone on to your second year of the masters at that time, hadn't you?
Yeah.
And I think it was a cracking opportunity. I think it was my first experience of coaching, coaching adults. My only previous before that was on a placement year for my undergraduate degree, working with under 14s in Leeds. So it was an opportunity that I gratefully took, and we had some good times there, didn't we?
Yeah, and a lot of that was introducing just some of the key principles of the masters, really. So understanding who you're coaching, what you're coaching, and how you're going to coach it. And I think that is for everyone to be aware of, is that's what's going to be the structure of this series. So each episode we're going to be taking one of them key elements and just discussing around it, what that actually looks like in reality. I think if you look at a lot of the content that's out there at the moment, there's not a lot there that's sort of helping you discuss how to actually approach these things with your players and get that buy-in to create that high quality of an environment, I suppose. So I think what we're quite good at, what from the masters, what do you think is the key benefit of understanding that who, what, how, and what's it for?
I think firstly, I think most coaches, within the rugby up and down the country at multiple different levels, are actually implementing their, that who, what, and how. But I think what the master's course, really allowed, I know for me, and through conversations with you, I think it really allowed me to gain a greater understanding of why those three factors are quite important. And then until you actually until you actually consciously think about, how am I going to implement the understanding of the who, creating the what, and actually implementing the how, I think it can really progress your coaching on in multiple different contexts, in multiple different environments.
Yeah, no, I think it's important to sort of maybe add some context to that there as well. So understanding the who is really getting to know your participants. That's going to be the big bulk of what this episode is going to be about, and we'll come on to that a little bit later. Once you understand the who, that's when you can look at the what, and we'll be going in delving into that a little bit later on in the series. But the what is very much how you take this idea of what they call a mental model and turn that into some sort of a performance model that helps visualize, I suppose, is the best way to say it, how you want to play. You know, what's great about that is everyone has a view of how the game should be played. Everyone's got this opinion; they're just not fully aware of it because they've not written it down yet.
No, and that's and this is what I think the Masters course really helped with in terms of it really helped visualize and actually put together that understanding, which helps clarify things and brings players and other coaches together if you're working within that coaching team.
Yeah, and I think then that brings on to the how, and I think this is the key important bit. Is a lot of people have these visions and these ideas of what they actually want to do, but when it gets to actually presenting that in practice, that clarity isn't always there. So we end up falling into the trap of being quite reactive with the sessions that we plan that might be connected to what happened on the weekend in the game, rather than actually how does this fit in the bigger picture? What is our vision for this area? And I suppose the example I've sort of been given recently to some people is that view around just exit sets, for example, how the only time teams actually practice exit sets is in an unimposed environment, which is madness. But actually, you can create games to do within sessions that can present players with them problems to solve that make them easier when they go into the game. So, I think that's an important thing about how you align them two together to set your objectives for the session. And if you've got them clear objectives, that makes what you're actually going to deliver more high quality. It's going to make more problem solving for players and essentially, hopefully, contribute them to making more informed decisions while in the game.
Yeah, well, I think that's the aim, isn't it? I think as coaches, we've all got those experiences where we do all this meticulous planning, but then one player gets a bit of rush of blood to not always their head, and it kind of just goes out the window. But yeah, in terms of creating, linking those three together of the who, what, and how, really does bring that team together in terms of that understanding of how the coach or the coaches want to play that game. And I think this is where this series in particular will really delve deep into creating those understandings to basically reach those performance outcomes.
Yeah, definitely. So we'll I suppose it's a good sort of point to then turn that back on to trying to really understand the who. And for me, I think it's first of all, and this might seem quite common to some people in terms of this view, but what is really important is to make that difference between when you're coaching kids all the way up to when you're coaching adults and the different stages that come with that. So I think we'll start with the low end of the spectrum, really. I suppose the coaching kids, so the under sixes to probably under 12s. I think we categorize them into them sort of breaks beforehand. So this actually aligns quite nicely to one of the first videos that's going out on the channel as well, which is around 5 key considerations when coaching children. Yeah, well, yeah.
It's like you've planned it all out.
You'd think so, wouldn't you? Some things never change. But with that video, I discuss in that around 5 key things that you need to be aware of when coaching children. That is, I think it does cover a lot of the higher age group, but it is more that under 6 to under 12s to start with around how you don't need to worry about the rugby to start with. We've got sport is a real powerful opportunity to develop people as well as sport skills. And I think first and foremost, one of the things that we need to do as coaches is to provide that safe and supportive environment. And that comes through realizing that you are coaching children. It's not about win at all costs. It's about providing a good experience that's going to want them to keep coming back.
Yeah, totally. And I think I remember going back to when I was playing as a child. I think the coaches that you kind of draw and you get that affinity to are those ones that make it fun at that age, that make it engaging. I remember I had a coach that just was that win at all costs, that really performance driven, and it's just, I think it does alienate those those kids. I think, like you said, if we can create an atmosphere and an energy that's more fun and engaging, those kids are more likely to pick up the sport later on going forward.
Oh, definitely. And I remember when I first started doing college education for the RFU a long time ago, when they had the old level 1, which was designed around just coaching children.
Yeah.
And one of the key things they sort of had on that, there was a survey done around why, about what people look forward to when they went down to the rugby club with the kids of these age groups. And winning came 46 on the list. It was behind what food was being served in the canteen afterwards.
That's important. It is important, that.
But this is the point, is understanding why are you participants going down. And the chances are, if they're under 6 to under 12s, it's because they're going down because the parents want them to be involved in rugby, because of these elements that we're talking about now, which comes on to point 2 around the social skills, and what rugby rings around, teamwork, respect, enjoyment, discipline, sportsmanship, for example. Yeah. That's why people want to come down. So they're not necessarily got actually to start with, I want to be a rugby player. They're going down because the parents are making that decision to take them down because of the values that come with it, or because they've played themselves. So they're not overly bothered about winning to start with. And then it's how we then, a lot of them are still learning how to actually just be people, I suppose. So the second consideration is, how are we using our sessions to develop social skills, for getting them to work as part of a team, through communication, connection with others, building a character, actually building empathy for other people as well. They're learning all these things through the sessions that they come to.
Which is more, it's really important, not just in sport, but in terms of life skills as well. And kids at that age, they are they're very impressionable. They do pick up on a lot of things, and if we can, if we as coaches can really, instill that at a young age, then it definitely provides them with, stronger opportunities going forward.
Oh, I remember there used to be a very powerful advert that NSPCC used to do about children see, children do. And they will mimic and copy behaviors of what we present. So I think when we're coaching kids, we need to be aware of understanding the who, is that they're a child. They're there to have fun and develop rugby alongside that, as well as key social skills that you need to know to just be a good person. So the first consideration was safe and supportive environment. The second one was to develop social skills as well as sport specific skills. The next one, especially with that age group, is the emphasis on fundamental movements. We're going to have a whole episode and a few videos dedicated to that coming up in the series. But fundamentals, I mean, you did sports science as your undergrad, didn't you, before you did the sports coaching masters? So
yes, I think you're about to put me on the spot.
Well, yeah, try and test some of the stuff that you've remembered. But you're probably, I did sports studies and business management as an undergrad before I did sports coaching, so I was never really on that science side. But you must be fully aware of the importance of fundamental movements.
Oh yeah, definitely. It creates. It really does help them going forward in terms of their progressing through into adolescence with, with those simple movements. I think in the next episode we'll really delve into that with a good guest. But yeah, no, it's providing them with that at a young age, creates that stability and that balance within their movements, within the movements going forward. That's my basic understanding of it. When I did this, when I did the sport and exercise science course, it was a long time ago. Not a long time ago now, but it's I was more interested in the psychology bit, but what I can remember is that like I said previously, they're very impressionable at that age, and if they can pick up these good fundamental movement skills, it really does help them in terms of that progression into later on, whether that be in rugby or another sport.
Yeah, it definitely, it goes back to, you've touched on stability there, but you've also got the actual object control and locomotor skills as well. So can they actually balance, twist, turn? Can they hold an object like the rugby ball, and can they actually move effectively, run properly, walk properly, jump, movement, them sort of skills? And we'll cover all that in more detail next week. So again, understanding that these kids, if we don't cover these fundamental movements with these children, then that's going to impact on their ability to perform some hard skills in rugby, pass, run. So I think that's why it really needs to be emphasised, as why we need to understand that age group more. About, they're not just there for rugby, they're there for wider sport, wider development skills as well.
Yeah.
Then we need to bring in some game understanding. Now, the last time I coached under sixes and under sevens, passing backwards was not something that were particularly high on their agenda. It was more throwing the ball anyway. So I think that's where we've got to realise that run forward, pass backwards, although they're the key things that underpin the game, they're not actually that important until around under nines. I think it becomes more heavily policed in terms of the laws, and that's when the tackle's introduced as well. So we need to focus on the key areas of the principles of play. So go forward, support, continuity, pressure, and then all that is underpinned by communication as well. You don't need to cover much more than that. Can they get the ball and run forward? Can someone follow them running into that space to try and score?
Who thought rugby was complicated, eh?
That's kind of simple. Well, we made that even more complicated when we got onto the building of a performance model. But that is something that we need to recognise, that they are the five simple, really key areas of the game. I think it is important to add that although we are talking about a lot of generic coaching, we are probably going to lean more towards our rugby background on a lot of this. Provide some of that evidence.
Yeah, but I think that's natural. I think that's natural of coaches. I think coaches, we're on here sharing our experiences, and throughout hopefully many episodes going forward, we'll be getting on other coaches to come in and share their experiences. And I think it's not always about, you don't always have to agree with another coach. You don't always have to agree with with their style of doing it. But we can, it's important to have those discussions and have these discussions between us. Because I know that you and I have had different opinions on a couple of things throughout our coaching career together. But I think through discussions we're able to find that happy medium. I think that that does benefit the players that we are coaching.
Yeah, definitely.
So I think it's important to have those differences in terms of dealing with kids. And I know you raised the point of talking, saying we need to put the kids first. In terms of dealing with parent expectations as well, and how do you think those two kind of link together? So if we've got a parent that really is that competitive parent, and that's come down to watch a training session, I think we've all experienced them as coaches.
It is, yeah, and I think there's probably get shut down saying this, but I'll say it anyway. What have I got to lose? But a lot of people, a lot of the time, when parents tend to get the kids down in sport, it's they are trying to live some of their own dreams through their kids that they couldn't tend to. You can look at me like that, but there is that level of expectation that everyone wants their kids to be the best they possibly can be. That's the natural parent instinct to have. So you want them to try and achieve the dreams that you might have had when you were a child. Now that's not mean that you're going to be the pushy parent. You just kind of expose them to as much varied and different opportunities as you can. That's my point. And I've probably gone about that in quite a direct and random way. But I think that is how everyone wants the best for their kids. But what we need to sort of be able and confident to do with as coaches is to be able to address some of these problems when they come up. I think what happens quite a lot is because a lot of the coaches that generally end up that we were trying to speak to here, they've all ended up being volunteers because they've played the game, or when they've took their kids down to the rugby club because they want them to be active, they want them to be healthy. So they generally either go, they usually try and go in and coach how they've always been coached, which obviously with kids isn't necessarily the right way to go about it. It's recognizing that first consideration that I spoke about around that safe and supportive environment, and that comes from being on the field, but also the touchline. So can we challenge big behaviour as and when it appears? So emphasising to the parents in meetings that this is why we're here. We're here to provide a safe, supportive environment that develops social skills and rugby skills and fundamental movements in line. This is why we're down here. This is what our values are. This is what we're going to stick to.
But then I think it also links back to I think one of the key phrases that kind of stuck with me during the master's course that we're both on is start with the end in mind. And when we're dealing with kids, we're coaching them right at the beginning of their journey, and we're hoping that they go and have a long, hopefully not all of them, but go and have a long successful career in rugby. And if we can start with that end in mind, so we start with that, how they're going to be as an adult. Let's really imprint these positive behaviours at a younger age, so they manifest into something a little bit more successful going forward.
That is an important point, because traditionally what happens is you start coaching with an age group and you'll follow that age group all the way through. So, you're learning as you go because each thing's change on the year that you go. The kids are changing in terms of their stage of development as well. So if we've got that continuity throughout, then it makes that transition up the age groups, I think, that a little bit easier.
Yeah. So in terms of with that transition, what's kind of like the main key focuses then for if we're progressing on from under 12s to the under 13s and above into those adolescent years then?
But I think you've still got to emphasise them social skills. I think you've still got to be encouraging them to be things like empathy and working with others, because I think they're important skills that we go and we can just start then looking at more rugby specific skills. So that's where you want to be playing a lot more of your developing skill acquisition type games. So 360 games, spell in any direction, with that emphasis on them key principles of play of go forward support, continuity, pressure, and communication. And there's been a lot of stuff already out there now around the different types of games that you can do to develop that. But I think if you can make them games fun with that emphasis of how it relates to the wider picture of the game, then I think that's quite important.
Oh, I think I definitely agree with that. I think because under 13s we go to full size pitches, don't we?
Yeah.
And I think that's when the competitiveness really becomes that main driver. And I think it's that fine balance, because the reason why these kids are still engaging in the sport is because they like that. Majority of them like that competitive edge, because it's sport, and sport is competitive by nature. But it is a very difficult balance between.
Usually when they've got to that age, it's because, like you say, they've now got an interest in the sport. They now want to kick on and develop as best they can. Some of them might be playing it regularly at the school that they're at. Some of them might have then started to get, I think the DPP starts at under 13s, under 14s as well, doesn't it? So some of them might start getting identified or wanting to progress on to some of these age groups. So they've got a hook for it then. You've got them engaged. They're there because they want to become better players. But what should have, if we've covered everything beforehand around fundamental movements, development of key core skills, then it should make that transition into more of these games that little bit easier, because they'll have a lot of these skills that they need already a little bit more of a higher level, which will then hopefully transition with better results in terms of the objectives that we set in sessions. So they'll find some goals a lot easier, and that's when it really challenges us coaches to be aware of levels of differentiation. So are we setting objectives that everyone in the session can get to this point? Most might get to this point, but some, the high flyers, will kick on and do the next bit. And that's when it starts to challenge us that a little bit differently from a coaching point of view, because we've got to be clear that the outcomes that we're setting for the sessions are relevant to that age stage of development where the participants are.
Yeah, and this is where understanding of players becomes even more important, and breaking down and having those good personal relationship with those players to have that understanding of their, first of all, their skill level, so we can start to tailor, we can individualize practice a little bit more. We can give certain players they call it a superpower, I think, potentially in one game. But then also through understanding of where they are on a personal level as well, in terms of developmental stage. I think there's plenty of people who've been out and spoken about how growing up through adolescence and what that does both on the body and mind. I think as two grown men now, we've experienced that firsthand. I think I like to think I'm still experiencing it at a relatively young age still. But it's I think weighing up and understanding how big some of these transitions are for these kids. I think going from under 11s to under 12s, and then under 12s to 13, that's some big years at school. They're potentially they're moving school into joining secondary, and this is where it links back to creating an engaging environment that you brought up previously. And that does still play a pivotal role. And this is where I think it's that fine balance between creating a competitive edge in which you want to drive these players on to want to succeed, but then also creating that safe, secure, and enjoyable environment.
Yeah, and I mean, I know with there is no, and this is one thing I like about it, there is no emphasis on leagues around that age group for younger age. They generally don't start until Colts now, but I don't think that means that what we do have a duty, although winning isn't important and the reason why, we do need to make sure that they are aware of becoming good winners and good losers at the same time. And I think that is an important aspect that we need to encourage because, you know, do you not agree? You just made a look.
Oh no, it's yeah, it's at that age, yeah, teaching them to be a good loser is massive. I just think it's funny that as soon as you get to 18, you're in an adult environment, there's no such thing as a good loser.
No,
And it's and maybe it's a flaw within the rugby, but you know, but I mean, being graceful in defeat. I think, you know, one of the key phrases that I learned from, you know, a different sport, but when I did karate growing up, and I didn't get the belt on a certain time. My sensei at the time, you know, he said, you know, when you lose, it makes winning feel a little bit more sweeter. And it's actually creating that grateful attitude and that respect to, you know, we are on a coaching and developing players is a process, and that process takes longer for some and doesn't for others. You know, I think that's the point that I just wanted to get across there.
Yeah, definitely. But I think that is important to understand in understanding the who, because, like you say, that because of their adolescence and the other things that are going on, they've not really made that connection. They're just going to be they're going to be disappointed. But it's then how we approach that as coaches to develop that as a social skill. That all these things happen. How do we react? How do we change? What do we need to do to make it better? So don't emphasize on mention at the result what's happened, but we don't make that the be all and end all. We talk about how we turn that into a positive. That's probably what I want to try and talk about there, because again, that goes back to how we develop people. And I think this is the key thing about, yes, as coaches, we want to develop the best of the players we can. And if I was coaching at that age group now, I'd probably judge my success not on my success will be personally judged on how many people I've still got playing up through whenever they left at 15, 16 and go on to someone else, rather than actually what we've achieved each season in terms of results. If I've still got a big playing base all the way through, that's found the environment I've created, the behaviours that I've used as coach, the social skills that I've developed, that they're all fairly competent players. That would be my judge of success. Does that make sense? I wouldn't be overly bothered about how many games we've won or lost. It would be, well, actually, if I've still got a load of people at my sessions, then that shows that I must be doing something right.
Yeah, but I also think there's a strong link between, you know, if we are developing players in the right environment and in the right way, then there's no reason for why positive results in terms of winning or losing don't come on the pitch as well. Yes, you might come up against a club that just has naturally stronger rugby players, but if we can, you know, create an environment which players want to play for a start, they're more likely to go out there and want to perform. And you know, I think we've got to be careful in terms of how we coach, in that we don't take away like that competitive drive, because that is a massive aspect of sport. But I do agree that it is a fine balance between creating that competitive edge and actually providing an environment which these players want to come back.
Yeah, and then I think how you would sort of start looking at the age stage, once they then start getting to 15 up, I think that's when we need to start looking at more practical elements of the game and start really bringing in them complexities of the sport. Yeah. We'll know from the environments that we've worked in that we've seen 18-year-old lads come into rugby programs who have all the skill. They are some of the most talented, skillful players I've seen, but they do not have a clue how to play rugby. It's true, isn't it?
Yeah,
we've got hookers that can kick downfield and, you know, do a good kick chase or kick the ball and intercept it themselves. We've got all these great core skills, but then actually being able to implement that in a more competitive environment where there is now this emphasis on the result, the pressure gets to them because they've not got the understanding of practically what they need to do where.
Yeah, and I know that you and I both coached. You and I both coached at Leeds Beckett. We were, I think, the first year together. We were the 3s and 4s coach, and we were really focused on that development squad. Do you think that was the most difficult thing when it came to coaching that group of players? Was actually understanding, you know, taking the time to understand everyone and who they were and what they brought and their understandings?
Well, yeah, I mean, we had a playing base in that first year of 180 players, And that was from the first team down to the 15. So it's a big chunk of people to work with. And like I say, you can identify a good player from the skills. And when you've got that many players and they're all displaying some of the key core skills that we need of pass, run, hit, that's the easy bit. Then what we found was then you drop them into a game where it would be the third team, where you'd be getting on a bus and going across to York to play their first team with the third team. And that's when the skills, they've got them, but they come under pressure.
Yeah.
When that element of actually putting them into practice in a competitive league game comes in. And I suppose that goes back to the point I made earlier about when we're under 15s, again, the result isn't important. The result is important, but not important at the same time, if that makes sense. But it's how we replicate them different types of pressures. So how we be able to create a game-based scenario in training that will expose the players to the types of decisions that they've got to make.
Yeah, and I think you and I both have this experience that when we have coached at this university level, when we've taken these first year students in, sometimes we're not picking the most skillful players because they don't have that understanding. So and they'd get frustrated because they'd come up to you and say, "Oh, what do we need to work on?" And it's actually, when you're at that level, it does take. I think it takes a little bit more time to create that game understanding that'll help them progress a little bit quicker. So if we can get that in at around that under 15s, under 16s, then moving into 17s and 18s would, I think does help massively, absolutely massively.
I think that mirrors back into going back to understanding the who, because I think that's what the players want. I think there's a lot of stuff out there around, playing these 360 games and creating multi-directional games to look at the broader sense of skill acquisition. And that's great. And I'm fully behind all of that. But we also need to start integrating these players into actually how to play rugby. Yeah. So what do we need to look for inside the 22? And you can still play games like that. You've just got to, it's how you constrain the game to bring that out. So I think that's where the changes are. So you've got them under 6 to under 12s. It's all about that fundamental movements, core skills, just getting them interested in rugby. You start fine tuning them skills and making them more aware, 360 games, playing go forward support continuity. And then that's when they start getting to 15s and they've got all these skills in the locker. It surely makes it easier then to do more technical and tactical.
Yeah. And yeah, and I don't think it's coaches, we need to focus on one over the other, because the worst thing you can do is, and I think I've experienced it definitely, that we've had players that tactically understand the game better than anyone, but because they don't have that technical ability or they've not worked on that technical ability, that's where they've suffered. So, in terms of developing young rugby players, it's developing that whole player, and that whole player is do they tactically understand the game? Yes. Do they have the technical skills to actually meet those tactical outcomes? Well, yes, they do. And if they've got those two fundamental areas, they can pretty much, I think, walk into any sort of environment or any sort of club and actually be a benefit to that club.
Definitely, yeah, 100%. So I suppose just as a quick recap on where we're at so far. So we've sort of covered around some of the 5 key considerations for that under 6 to under 12s around environment, fundamentals, social skills, core skills, game understanding, more skill act from under 13s to under 15s, change the different dynamic of the games, but still with an emphasis focused on that social skills. 15s up start, still, then social skills I think are still important to be included because it's developing they are still the young adults, but they are still children within that as well. More the social skills elements, but with a more technical and tactical understanding of the game layer. Suppose that then brings us into what changes when we start looking in the adult game then. So from your perspective, you understanding the who in an adult environment, a mouthful, what's important? Why is that important, first of all?
Well, I think it's important because we've all coached. We coach in different environments, and if you're at different ends of the spectrum, whether you're coaching a community game or or more towards the elite, we've got to understand the main drives and motivations of our players. So if we, for example, if I was to go into a community rugby club, I'd want to understand, I'd want to get to know the players on that personal level, and actually, gain that understanding of why they're here, why are you participating in rugby, because they're not being paid at that level. What gets you to the club on a Tuesday or a Thursday or any other time during the week, and then again week in, week out on a Saturday throughout the whole season.
Yeah, when it's raining sideways, what's motivating them to come down from their warm living room in December to train at rugby?
I think I've had that question about coaching in that weather as well. The beauty of working when we're working at Otley Enzians, you can look out the window and still see the pitch.
Yeah, you can. It's right next to the bar.
With a radiator just in front of the window.
Yeah, it does have a bonus to that. But I think that's really important, and this is where, I think it's good to talk about what happened when we first went to Otley, because one of the reasons I took on that project was I knew that they had a really good set of players there that were probably batting below the average, that they had all the skills, had been to a lot of them had gone to school together, there was a good culture, they all wanted to be, they were all good rugby players, they just lacked that general game understand. There's stuff that I thought I could bring from the masters to it around the mental model, understanding the what. We came in, I asked them 10 questions before we started, and they were the 10 questions that the vice chancellor at the university, he came in and did a talk on our module called Understanding Expertise. And he said that when he first came in, he asked these 10 questions, and he got all staff to do it, and he worked out the key sort of elements to it. And I thought, well, actually, if you're going into an environment, that's an important thing to be able to do, because it allows you to then align and set the objectives that you want. So that the questions I asked were, first of all, which playing squad are you participating in? So I think that's really important, because you got an idea of who's going to interact with the sessions, who's going to try and turn up. What do you like about the club? What would you like to remain the same in training and match day? What would you like to change at training and match day? Is there anything you're worried about might change? What do you think the current strengths are in the team's playing style? What do you think the current weaknesses are in the team's playing style? What do you think the club's vision should be going into the new season? What is your individual ambition as a player? And I think that's really important. And I think we'll come back to that sort of in a second about understanding the who and why that's important. And then, is there anything else you feel you'd like to comment on ready for the new season? So the 10 questions I sort of came up with. And it was really useful process from what you might change, because they all came and said the same stuff that I'd already had in my head that we were going to come in and do around the needed a set attacking set of principles and defensively. But what's mad is they could attack. The year before I went there, they scored 642 tries but conceded 380 or something like that, maybe 400. But it was great. It was clear that they could play attacking rugby and score tries, and with the backline that they had, that was perfectly clear as well, because it was a good strength of ours. But defensively was an issue.
Yeah.
And we needed to come in and set up a system of play for that. So that allowed me to then shape what our preseason would look like in terms of the what. So I could tailor it to make sure that we had high engagement quickly, because I'd gone to the players and asked them what they wanted to work on, and we worked on it straight away. So we got that buy-in quite quickly.
Yeah, and I think also when you're working with adults, in particular, it's it can be quite a time-consuming process to actually get to know these players, and I think we did this quite well in that first year. Myself, you, and Quinny. We should mention Quinny, or get a bit upset. The three of us, we took the time to, post-session, pre-session, to actually go and speak to these players on an individual level. And I think, yes, I understand that some coaches don't have that ability due to time and pressures that that are external to rugby. But I think that really benefited us that year.
I think that goes back to that
personal relationship.
And I think that goes back to that question 9 of what your individual ambition as a player, because we had lads there that could have stepped up to the National League clubs, whether it was Oakley, Otley, Harrogate as an example.
Yeah.
But they needed 12 months to be exposed to a more professional environment to be able to make that step up. So by understanding that, it gives us an idea of actually what is our player cycle turnaround potentially going to be like. If we give these players that experience and them skills, we need to make sure that we've got a foundation of more coming through. And that's where Quinny really stepped up as well with that, the Colts area as well, and working in trying to get that up and running, because that sort of set that base level that we needed for more players coming through. But it was interesting when we were chatting the other day. You made up a good comment within an adult environment. It's not just managing the players; it's how you manage up.
Yeah, and I think that's vital. Don't get me wrong. My firm belief is that the players' wants and needs will come first. But then, I think I've spoken with coaches and I've experienced it myself, being, a head coach at an adult club. You have to be able to gain that understanding of what the club want themselves. And when we talk about managing up, that's, right, the committee who meet once a month. They've got their expectations of what they want from the club. Some committees want the club to really progress on and progress up through the leagues, whereas some clubs are they're content, they're happy with getting good numbers into the club, getting good money behind the bar, creating a good atmosphere there is their main drive. And I think as a coach, that's important to know, because it can increase or decrease certain pressures that you place on yourself, and actually change the focus of what you want from your playing group, depending on what the outcomes are, or what the the hierarchy want.
But you're right, because it all starts on more people who come down by the environment that you create on the pitch. So by understanding where they want to be and where they want to go, and it was quite. I mean, in all fairness, on looking back on it, going into there was quite an easy transition, but for two reasons. One, the players that were available and their ambition of where they wanted to go, but two, the fact that they'd had that era of the National Cup with the potential to play at Twickenham. That gives people that motivation to come down. It made the job a little bit easier going into that environment. And like I said earlier, this is a long, difficult process in a lot of cases. And I was still a student, so I did have time to do that. But if you plan it out right, it can have a massive positive impact in not only what happens on the field, but also what happens off the field.
Yeah. Oh, and there are ways that it doesn't always have to be that time consuming. I don't want to scare coaches into thinking that they become the be all and end all of life. It could be a 5-minute catch up with a player who's at the bar after training, or a 10-minute catch up with them after a game before you have to go and do something else. But those smaller interactions off the pitch and away from that environment actually potentially sometimes are more beneficial than talking to them on the pitch during a session.
Yeah, because we used to have the first half hour from 7 to 8:30 was where players could come down and do their own individual thing. So that's an opportunity then, where if they did want one-to-one feedback, they could book in, they could come down, they could speak, we could work on a specific skill that they wanted to do. So
Yeah.
like Murph, our fullback, really wanted to work on his kicking, because he was very much a running fullback, but he was aware in how we needed to play. At times he needed to be confident at kicking at the same time. So he came down and worked with Pato, who came down and did some kicking with him as well. So it's recognizing why your players are there, what they want, and what they want to work on. And again, because it's amateur, especially the environment that we were working in there, it was down to the players' own commitment levels and enjoyment that brought them down there. They weren't financially incentivized to be there.
No.
It's really important to get an understanding of what they want, because that's gonna get them to come back.
Definitely. Yeah, I think I agree with you wholeheartedly on that.
So I think we've covered all the relevant sort of age stages there. It's been relative. We've gone into some quite good detail there. I suppose the key thing to emphasize is this is very much sort of an information sharing point, really. there'll be more stuff going on the YouTube channel around how you can do this. And I think next week we've got a really good episode with Christian Sharple from Barefaced Conditioning, who's going to come on. And I mean, I work with Christian at the RFU. He's now an S&C coach and do some stuff within football academies. But I think it's going to be a really good to get him on to understand, going back to working with kids, around why fundamental movements are important and the long-term benefit that they've got in terms of benefiting players. And I think that's when we'll be getting more into the meat and bones about actually stuff that you can take on to your practice. I think this is just sort of episode 1, outlaying over what we're actually going to try and achieve over this next sort of 10 episode journey, really.
Yeah, and I think going forward, we'd love to hear. I think we'd love to hear lots of different stories about how people have really got to understand their who from their own environments. I think it'd be quite interesting to, like I said, like we said at the start of the podcast, the start of this episode, we want to create, and it'd be nice to create a nice coaching world in which we can share and express these different ideas. And if there's any ideas out there, please.
Yeah, I think the words are communities of practice, I think, is the key buzzword in these environments at the moment. But you're right. I think, definitely if you listen to this on your phone, try and find the YouTube channel where there is a video of this conversation if you really want to see it. But comment below on the video with your experiences of understanding your participants, or any questions that you want around how we could tailor these questions a little bit further on, and we can do short videos to help give you more content on that. We've very much spoken on a rugby club environment here, but there's probably teachers that might need some support with this, as well as people working in other universities that might want an idea of how to best engage these players when they come on, that we might be able to come up with some content for. So yeah, if you've got any ideas you want us to try and look at, anything that you want us to cover, then just comment below on the video, subscribe to the channel, and we'll try and put some content together for people.
We shall.
Yeah, episode 1
done.
Yeah. You're trying to click onto that bit of Yorkshire, aren't you, Harrison? You've moved to Yorkshire. So guys, thanks for listening.
I like to think I'm an adopted Yorkshireman now. Yeah, I grew up down south, and now I'm living back down south, but I spent 6 years in the family live in Yorkshire, so I'll go with adopted Yorkshireman.
All right, guys, thank you for listening to episode 1. I hope you've enjoyed it. I hope you found it informative. Like I said, head to the YouTube channel, like, subscribe, and comment the video, and we'll see you next week for with Christian from Barefaced Conditioning.
Goodbye.
Yeah, bye.